So I've been searching for the smallest case that I can fit an ITX system in, and I think I have found just the one. So last year I was lucky enough to upgrade my whole computer with new components, but I thought I would pass on my old parts to my partner. So I had the AMD 5600X, I had the GTX 1070, and it was all put in this Cooler Master NR200. But for this build, I wanted something much, much smaller. So I hunted for the smallest ITX cases that you could find where I could reuse all the parts that I had. So an ITX motherboard, SFX power supply, and a 3-fan graphic card. And this is the smallest that I found. At least the smallest without costing an arm and a leg, but with this one, it has to be 3D printed. Okay, in the end, I purchased the Modcase 3D. So this is a fully 3D printed case from the ground up. You do need a little bit of hardware like a power button and some of the front I/O, which you can purchase from AliExpress, or you can also purchase it from Amazon. And when you purchase it, it just comes with all the different files as well as instructions, everything that you need to assemble this case. I think if it's your first time building a PC and your first time 3D printing, this is probably not the project for you. But if you have the skills for one, you can definitely learn the other as you go, because neither of these things are too complicated on their own. On this path, I did mess up a bit. I didn't buy all the correct parts, so I'm going to have some trouble. But hopefully, if you go ahead with this, you're not going to make any mistakes because you're going to read the instructions. So the Modcase 3D comes in 3 different sizes, and larger cases obviously support various different things, like additional support for AIOs, all-in-one liquid coolers, as well as longer graphics cards. Okay, so moving on to printing. Printing was a-okay. I did have some issues because some parts did need support, and I did not realize this because I didn't read the instructions. But even though I didn't enable them, things were still okay. Also, cleaning off supports, it can be a pain. I do have small files. I used a knife here, some cutters. Everything seemed to work well, so pretty pleased with that. Some things I had to print in separate parts or in multiple parts just because my 3D printer is not big enough. I'm running the Bamboo Lab P1P, and unfortunately these side panels needed to be printed in 2 and then rejoined together. Before I put everything together, I'm going to take the system apart and I'm just going to test everything before I put it in. In my previous system, in the NR200, I did not use a PCIe riser cable, so I was a little bit worried with some of the PCIe riser cable compatibility issues, but in this case, my computer booted, so I was really, really happy. If I had to put all this stuff in the case and then it didn't boot, I would absolutely hate myself. So before you ever install your PC parts into your case, make sure to just make a makeshift test bench, test it outside of the case, save yourself all that hassle. But with that done, we're ready to screw the case together. So I've got 3 of the 4 walls, and I thought I'd leave one separated because I wanted to keep the bottom open to install parts. But to be honest, in the end, it doesn't really matter. You need all 4 main walls of the case to put anything inside. But you can also add your power button in here. I would probably do it while all the parts are disassembled. And I also have a USB port to chuck into the front I/O. There's also the option for a USB-C port. Unfortunately, my motherboard does not support a front USB-C header. One of the worst parts about this is when you're trying to install the USB port in, you do have to shave some of the ports. So you just get a knife and just cut it down, test fit it, cut it down, test fit it. I probably did this 10 to 20 times. Just couldn't figure out the right fitment. Eventually I got there. I just had to trim the USB near the actual connection port a lot further backwards. And then after that, you just screw it down, make sure it doesn't fall out, just tug on the cable, and then it's pretty secure in there. Okay, let's just chuck the bottom on. We have our case to put things into, and we are off to the races. Voice over me here. I've already installed the power supply into the case, and I've also attached all the cables from the power supply onto the motherboard. I've got my PCIe riser cable here, and we're just going to clip this in, and we're going to slot this into the other side of the case. Now that's done, we just have to line up the screw holes between the case and the motherboard, and then we can screw this thing down. It is a little bit fiddly, just because it's 3D printed. The tolerances aren't exactly perfect. They're off by maybe like less than 1%, but otherwise it's not too bad. Don't forget to install your I/O shield before you put your motherboard in, and that's really it. This is where the fun really starts. I'm trying to make the GPU bracket holder. I don't have all the right parts, and I'm going to have to use a heat thread insert here. Now it's time to deal with the rest of the bracket. So this was important because the screw obviously goes into that M3 nut. Okay, so the bracket that we 3D printed obviously attaches to the PCIe riser cable, and you can see I've got 2 of these black clips. In the previous video, I did have a clear one. One of the black ones broke, so that's why I had to print a clear one, and this was an earlier take. But putting that bracket on here with the clips, you can then screw it all together, and that's how the PCIe riser cable is secured to the bracket, and then the bracket is then secured to the case. I've now got this inserted into the case. So I've got a screw, and because I don't have the right part, I had to go and buy these little nuts. So I've got this little nut on there. Obviously I don't have a wrench that's too small. So I've gone ahead, got a pair of tweezers, really tried to clamp it down, come in through the other side with my screwdriver and just secure that down to the case. And that, very fortunately for me, was very effective. Okay, this is what the back side of the case now looks like. So we have our power supply on the right hand side. Next to that, we have our motherboard with the PCIe riser cable. And you can see that the PCIe riser cable bracket has been attached to the bottom of the case. Now we're just plugging in our GPU cables, and then we're going to be able to insert our GPU in there. After that, we are pretty much done. We just have to install the two side panels. Now let's boot this up. I'm not going to go into any thermal testing here just because I don't have the power supply unit in the correct orientation. And I know that is going to have a pretty big effect on the thermal performance. But given that none of these parts are really high end, I'm not expecting any sort of issues cooling these parts down. Anyway, that's really it. A tiny sub 9 liter case that is completely 3D printed. A challenge, no doubt, but there's nothing too crazy. If you do go about this, make sure you read those instructions, make sure you buy the correct parts, and make sure you know which of the 3 cases included you'll be building. I went for the smallest case here, just strictly for the portability. I don't plan on using AIOs, no water cooling, no pumps. I don't need any of that. I don't have a super long graphics card, so this is absolutely perfect for me. Perfect, now that's done. Let's just go through some size comparisons. This is it next to a can, this is it next to a PS5 controller, and this is it next to the NR200, which is 20 liters, my Modcase Evo, which is 13 to 14. If you want more information, I'm going to include the link to the website below. Check it out. Anyway, like and subscribe. I will see you later. Bye.